say that the issue of plastics generally is a major question for everyone across the organics recycling industry. And of specific interest is the value and the uses and I guess general questions around the question of certified compostable plastics. And that question has been raised so often and so many discussions had that it's become clear to the board of AORA that it's necessary to ask questions at a higher level and to answer them at a higher level. So for that reason, we've activated our partnership with the Australian Bioplastics Association, and I'm pleased to say that we have today both the National Chair of AORA in Peter Wadewitz and Rowan Williams, the President of the Australian Bioplastics Association, to address those questions. My name's Peter Olah. I'm the National Executive Officer of AORA, and I'm here in simple terms to welcome you. I'd also like to just do a bit of housekeeping. There's two buttons at the bottom of your screen. One is Q&A. If you'd like to ask questions, please click on that. We've scheduled today so that, as you can see, there'll be plenty of time towards the end of this webinar to answer any questions you have, and also hopefully if there's a broader discussion to have that as well. So please use your Q&A tab if you have questions. If you have technical problems or there's anything that's not working for you through the presentation, there is a chat tab. Please use that chat tab to address technical or similar problems. With that, thank you again for attending. It's my pleasure to introduce Peter Wadewitz, the National Chair of AORA. Peter.
Good, thanks, Pete. Welcome everybody. This is very, very exciting to have so many on board. I want to start off with a bit of the bigger picture and how all these conversations that we're having and the education that we're giving everybody is so important. With the current policies that the environment ministers have all signed off on, that we will reduce our waste to a landfill. It's 5 years. And so what we all have to do is continue all these products fit as compost. Biggest cost of actually getting the products out, as we all want to do, which is compost back to soils. So when we get people like Rowan that are prepared to spend their time and give us all this education, we need to also start to have the conversation about all the other products that are going to come online, like bamboo, forks, knives, plastics, trays, etc., etc. And then we need to also discuss that in how do we make sure that they are all supplied to some degree, because at the moment they don't have to meet any of those requirements. I had a case the other day where I was asked if a compostable drink bottle would be acceptable. And I said, well, yeah, it'll be acceptable, the compost, as if it's certified to the Australian standards, but does it really go into the recyclables stream, and is it going to mess up that stream? So there's a whole range of things that we need to talk about, and we need to make sure that the products meet the Australian packaging covenants and the Environment Minister, which means it's a reusable, recyclable or compostable. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Rowan, if I may. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. There's a couple of issues in there to start with, but we'll probably get to that in Q&A at the end, I would hope. Just as a quick thing, Peter, Olah, it's the Australasian Bioplastics Association, because we also have to include our friends across the ditch in New Zealand. But that's just a minor point. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully that's working. Yep, there we go. Alex, can you see that okay?
Yep, we're all good.
Okay, good. I'll get going then. So thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the welcome. This is a 30-minute presentation trying to just give some information and education on what are bioplastics and, more importantly, the certified compostable varieties, but I want to just give some information about the whole family of bioplastics first. So let's go. Hopefully the screen will change. Come on. Okay, here we go. Sorry, a bit slow probably from my end. So what are bioplastics first and foremost? So bioplastics are a family of materials that are certified compostable, can be certified bio-based, or both. They are certainly niche products in the plastics portfolio. And at the end of this presentation, or towards the end, I'm going to give you some details on production capacities globally so that you can see just how niche they are when contrasted against, say, conventional packaging materials or conventional plastics. A key thing to remember here is that all certified compostable bioplastics are biodegradable, but not all biodegradable plastics are certified compostable. Verification of certification is provided in the form of a certificate of conformance from the ABA, for example, after confirmation from an independent auditor that all requirements of the standards are met. So in this context, we'll talk about Australian Standard 4736, or colloquially the Industrial Compostability Standard, and AS 5810, the Home Compostability Standard. If certified compostable, compostability, and therefore biodegradability as defined, is assured as the material has passed all the requirements of the standards. It's important to note that there is no standard globally for biodegradability. It doesn't exist. The test methods for biodegradation and disintegration are carried within the compostability standards like AS 4736 or AS 5810. And I stress it's only the Australian standards that are of import for Australia. The European norms and the ASTM for US or any other are inferior standards and do not carry an ecotoxicity test, which was considered important for the Australian standards. Who is the ABA? Well, first and foremost, we are the peak industry body for the bioplastics industry in Australia and New Zealand. And the most important part of our role is we're here to advocate for the appropriate use of bioplastics. And just quickly to Pete's point about a compostable bottle, we would not consider that an appropriate use of bioplastics, or certainly compostable bioplastics, because, for example, today those water bottles are made of PET. PET has a robust recycling stream. Why would we interfere with that by basically having a compostable bottle that really doesn't change anything? We're a registered incorporated association. We're a not-for-profit, and I stress we are volunteers from the industry. This is unpaid work. So we're here to educate and answer questions about the appropriate use of bioplastics. We manage the only verification program for verification of claims by members and non-members alike to the requirements of the standard. So if people want to claim that they conform to the Australian standards, they can voluntarily run through our verification program and receive a certificate of conformance to give their customers, who might be a retailer or an organics recycler or somebody like that, proof that their product conforms to all the requirements of the standards. We look at different verification programs. For example, we're talking at the moment about soil biodegradable mulch films to replace conventional PE that can't be collected or isn't collected or is inappropriately disposed of. We're looking at renewable resource content of bio-based plastics, and we're looking at the labelling of organic recyclable plastics as well, and that's why we've had this interaction with APCO over time. And we're truly linked in globally with European bodies, US bodies, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Malaysia, Thailand, who are all going through the same education process and looking at compostable plastics as a possible alternative for packaging or other applications around the world. We have an independent auditor called DINSERTCO in Germany. We interact with TÜV SÜD, who's also another certifying body, and we interact with testing laboratories such as Scion in New Zealand, or indeed organic waste systems in Belgium, but of course there are others. There is no Australian accredited testing laboratory. Scion in New Zealand is our closest testing laboratory that's accredited. This whole page here and the presentation will be made available to everybody after this session, so I won't go through all of this, but I just want to stress that we provide education. That's what today is all about as well. We try to promote things like such as source separation programs for food waste, for FOGO, for composting at end of life. Hence, we take our relationship with AORA particularly. It's very important to us to use those resources to educate. We work on technical development of different standards at different times to keep them current and up to date. We've worked with APCO and AORA to develop the guidelines for compostable packaging that was recently released during lockdown. We've responded to inquiries from the Victorian Senate on topics like marine plastic pollution, into packaging, microbeads and all this stuff. Where certified compostable products don't contribute to microplastics, but we have to make those points clear. And most importantly, again, for things such as appropriate use, we consult on material selection, education and community engagement. So things like when we do get the calls from people who want to make compostable bottles because they want to put some greenwash out there, we tend to frown on that application. And we self-regulate through a code of conduct signed by members to ensure appropriate communication and marketing of these things. So it's not about spin, it's about appropriateness. And appropriateness can be measured in many different ways through either life cycle analysis or sustainability analysis or decision trees or whatever like that. It might not always be that a compostable anything is the right choice. And there's many reasons through that decision-making process. We also do not endorse labelling of a product biodegradable. It's just not enough to say something's biodegradable as a claim or as a label. It doesn't tell you the when it biodegrades, how it biodegrades, where it biodegrades, what the byproducts of the biodegradation might be, if any, and therefore we think that can be generally misleading. It's only with the certified compostable materials that have the seedling logo for AS4736 or the home composting bin logo for AS5810 that you can be assured those products will completely biodegrade and disintegrate as per the requirements of the standards in the appropriate process. And in all of these things, a claim of conformance to any standard has to be substantiated. So this conformance needs to be proven. That's why we have the certificates of conformance. The bottom pictures here are, or the middle picture, sorry, is an example of a certificate of conformance. The left-hand logo is the compostable looped seedling logo, which we licensed from European Bioplastics. And the home compostable logo for AS5810 on the right-hand side is the property of the Bioplastics Association, so ours. We've gone with the seedling logo because it's already globally recognisable, so we didn't want to create a new logo. In the case of the home compostable, we were the first standard globally for home composting, therefore we created our own. So the key point from this slide, other than the certificates and the logos, is if a supplier to you claims they've got a compostable product conforming to the Australian standards, but they cannot give you a certificate of conformance, the question you should be asking is why not? The key differences between the two Australian standards are these. With the 4736, which actually is entitled Biodegradable Plastics Suitable for Composting and Other Microbial Treatment. And having just said we don't like using the word biodegradable standalone, but this standard was developed in 2004 and 5, long before we started having this discussion about what does biodegradable as a label actually mean. So perhaps at some point we might rename the standard. But for the purposes of it, it's for composting and other microbial treatment. And then, of course, the 5810 is for the same thing, suitable for home composting. And the key differences are shown there under the test conditions. For industrial composting, it's biodegradation within 6 months. For biodegradation in the home composting standard, it's 12 months. And you can see the differences in temperature. So basically the differences are for industrial composting, it is shorter time, higher temperature. And for home composting, it's longer time, lower temperature, as you would probably expect. And you need to pass both of these, and there are the test methods in there as ISO 14855 and the two different ISO for disintegration under the two different conditions. Oh, and I'd so quickly go back, I stress that when you go through this process to be certified, it's pass or fail. There is no half pregnant, halfway house here. You either pass it or you do not. Simple as that. What do the Australian standards include? Of course, we have characterisation, including maximum heavy metal limits, what the biodegradability under specified test methods needs to be, disintegration under the specified test methods as per the previous slides, the compost quality according to AS 4454, the test methods within that, density, dry solids, volatile solids, it's pretty comprehensive. And here, the toxicity, this is the main difference between the Australian standards and any other standards on the planet, is that we have an earthworm toxicity test that you need to pass, which is an additional requirement. And finally, recognisability. The use of the logo provides recognisability of conformance to the standard. So, organic recycling conditions vary greatly, and this is what's of interest to organics recyclers here in Australia. We know there's no one process that's identical to another. So compostable plastics, whilst definitely compostable if they're certified, may not work in somebody's or in a processor's particular environment because the resident time is too short or the streams are not the same or whatever it might be. So it's not a universal solution, and we've never portrayed it as that. What we've sort of said, if the planets all align and you can use a certified compostable bag to enable source separation of food waste in the home, and you've got a processor that wants that food waste, good, we can get it out of the landfill. But it's not available in every postcode, and it's not accessible to everybody, of course. So it's a horse for a course. But the key point is that many thousands of tonnes of food and garden organics, including plastics which have been certified to meet the requirements of all standards, have been satisfactorily processed around the world with no adverse effect from the certified compostable product. So it's been going on for 20 years. It's not new, but we recognise that it's not, for everybody. Important thing is, if you don't have a strong organic recycling stream and you want to have compostable packaging in the future, if you haven't got an organics recycling stream for that certified compostable packaging to go into, it's of little value. Yeah. If you're going to send a compostable product to a landfill, you haven't really changed much. So the idea is to embrace organics recycling, embrace source separation, get that going where you can in a closed loop or in a municipality or wheresoever you can establish it. And then if you choose to have compostable packaging, then it can go into that stream from curbside or wherever else. I stress again that only Australian standard certified products are suitable for Australia and New Zealand. And as I said before, this has been proven over 20 years. Then they will disintegrate, biodegrade completely to CO2, water and some biomass and leave no harmful residue. It's often said that the ABA is the custodian of these standards, which we are not. In fact, the ABA didn't exist when these standards were created, but we picked them up as voluntary standards to have a program that verifies compliance to them, but we didn't write them. And as you can see, we weren't even part of the technical committee that developed them. And here is a list of all the people at the time that were in there, so you can see it was pretty broad. So from the Retailers Association to the Feds to Keep Australia Beautiful and everybody else, certainly the other global standards we used as reference documents, and it's consistent with other standards around the world, but it has the additional worm ecotoxicity test. So I just want to make it clear that we just administer a program, but we weren't the ones who wrote the standard, but we certainly do try to keep an eye on the validity and currency of these standards. Same for AS 5810. Here you can see Planet Arc was involved, CSIRO was involved, ABA was involved because this was around 2007. The ABA began in 2005, I think, or 6, can't remember. I didn't join until 2009. Again, same reference documents, but this time we relied on AS 4736 and also an additional worm toxicity test for these. So they're consistent. So what does it mean for organics recycling? We've proven where it can work. Compostable bags are effective and attractive to a consumer if we want to divert organic waste from the landfill and put it out into a FOGO or into another approved method of source separation collection. You can be confident that the bag or packaging product that carries the logos will disintegrate and biodegrade in a composting cycle with no adverse effect on the output. But again, I stress, not every processor wants these products because their process might not be able to process them. But it's not an issue necessarily with the materials. But if you have a 7 to 10 day residence time in an in-vessel composting plant, it's probably too short to effectively process these materials and have them completely go away. So you remember from the standards for industrial compostability, you need to achieve this biodegradation and disintegration within the 180 days. But in practice, in a windrow composting, and some of you have seen this, in 4 to 6 weeks, you can't find the bag or the package or the cup or whatever it might be. But in other places where the residence time is, I say too short, but it's just shorter, you might not achieve full biodegradation of the materials. If you let the process keep running, you certainly would achieve it. So the whole idea here is this facilitates circular economy principles for the organic fraction and getting that stuff out of landfill, or in some parts of the world, getting it out of incineration. So we don't, enforce or anything Australian consumer law, but we do point out that we do endorse the ACCC guidelines, including their document Green Marketing and the Australian Consumer Law, wherein that businesses that make environmental or green claims should ensure that they are scientifically sound and appropriately substantiated. So here is why we run a verification program to the standards, so that if the ACCC knocks on the door saying you're making these claims, you can show your certificate of conformance, which is obviously supported by test reports and a whole heap of other data, and say, look, I have substantiated my claim, and generally they're satisfied. So it's very important to have a qualification of substantiation. In fact, the ACCC guidelines say you can't or should not make an unsubstantiated claim. It doesn't just relate to compostable products, it relates to many other things under consumer law, or many other products. So as I said, we have no role in the monitoring or enforcement of consumer law. However, where we are made aware from the marketplace that a product that purports to be certified is not processing, and you as organics recyclers, for example, will know very quickly if a material is not performing as it should after days or maybe a few weeks in your process, because if it's staying intact, it's probably more than likely a fake product. So we rely heavily on reports back from the market that something that purports to be the right thing isn't doing what it should do in practice, and we follow up those claims by perhaps taking action with the supplier of those materials, or asking for please explain, or asking for re-audit of the product, or if we're not satisfied with any of those answers, then we do write letters to the ACCC, basically dobbing these people in, and then hoping that some action will be taken there under false and misleading claims. So to the extent that we can, we try to police the marketplace, but we're certainly not, we don't have that role per se. To give you some currency, we have more than 100 certificates of conformance out there today, recognising compliance with the requirements of the AS 4736. These products can include bioplastic resins, films, bags, packages, products of natural origin, paper composites, and bagasse. And whilst natural materials are not necessarily required to be certified, lots of people have volunteered to do it so that they can have a certificate to show their customers that their natural products are unadulterated. So no residual chlorine or no residual monomers or no additives or binders or adhesives, and that the material is okay. They don't have to do it, but many have chosen to do it. I stress also, we'll just do this first. There's more than 50 certificates of conformance to the home composting standard now, covering similar products as well. What I'd like to point out, that doesn't mean there's 100 products or 50 products. There can be more than one product on the certificate, for example, food serviceware or other applications. And I'm aware of some certificates that carry more than 15 products. So there's no shortage of certified compostable products available. It's probably the facilities to process them and take them and collect them appropriately that's probably lacking. And a listing of the verified products can be found on the ABA website, and the link you can see there. I'm happy to provide it at a later stage. Now, this is the bit I really want to spend hopefully a little bit more time on, and this is on the global market production capacities for bioplastics. So we rely on European Bioplastics. It's a corporate entity. We're a not-for-profit with volunteers. We don't have the money nor the resources to be able to do these kinds of market studies. So we rely on European Bioplastics to share this data with other industry associations around the world, and they do. So this is a 2019 study showing basically the evolution of production capacities of bioplastics. And I refer you back to sort of my second slide, which says bioplastics are a family of products. You have bio-based or renewable content, non-biodegradable materials. So in this case, for example, you have polyethylene, and you'd be familiar with the grey ubiquitous polyethylene bag. So it's made from oil. It's not renewable, but you can have a bio-based polyethylene where you replace the fossil carbon with a renewable source of carbon, and it's polyethylene, and it's chemically identical to its oil-based brothers and sisters. So here, that's shown in the green. And biodegradable here, think certified compostable. Okay, not all would be, but just for the purpose of this discussion, let's talk about these as being certified compostable. And this is global production capacities. So you can see in 2018, we had just over 1 million tonnes of compostable materials and 934 tonnes of the bio-based, non-biodegradable bioplastics. And the forecast out to 2024 shows growth in both, but it's certainly not, you know, another 1 million tonnes. It's a relatively small increase in both. So roughly 300 tonnes for compostables over the period, and around about, you know, 150 odd tonnes for the bio-based non-biodegradable. So contrary to people's belief that compostable plastics are exploding and they're turning up everywhere and they're flooding the market and all that, I'm hoping that you can see here that the capacity to produce them simply doesn't exist today in the volumes that some people think. Rightly or wrongly, that's the deal. So in total, you can see for both types, we have about 2.4 million tonnes. The important contrast here is the global production capacity of conventional plastics is around 350 million tonnes. And it's forecast by 2040 to be around 500 million tonnes. Right? Of that 350 million tonnes of conventional plastics, around 175 million tonnes finds its way into packaging around the world. So if you have 175 million tonnes of conventional plastic going into packaging and you only have 1.3 million tonnes of compostable resin or materials, I hope you can see the imbalance. You're not suddenly going to replace the plastics in packaging with a compostable alternative. So here it's just showing the same data in another way, but showing the 2019 data. Still, it's around 2.4 million tonnes in 2024. Same data, just expressed a different way. So talking here about bio-based materials. So here we talk about PE or polyethylene or PET, polyamides, polypropylene. Sure, you're familiar with these conventional plastics. But as you can see, if you're contrasting this with 350 million tonnes of the oil-based alternatives, and we only have 1 million tonnes of bio-based alternatives in 2024, again, there's a huge imbalance. And this is simply because bio-based bioplastics, whilst completely recyclable alongside their oil-based brothers and sisters, are simply not being produced at scale today. And there's reasons for that: investment, availability, whatever it might be, demand. But really the only difference between an oil-based conventional plastic and a renewable-based bioplastic is you get a zero carbon footprint with the bio-based ones. Again, I'm trying to stress here, you've got a 350 million tonne capacity in place today and a little over 1 million tonnes of the bio-based recyclable alternatives. Talking now about compostable or biodegradable bioplastics in the forecast. Here I've broken them up into the key groups. Here you can see it's a little bit over 1.3 million tonnes globally, split up between these different polymers around the world. So on this point, it's forecast that there's a little bit of investment, but it's really only about 150,000 tonnes, not 150 million tonnes. And I think the most recent announcement of, for example, this PBAT, compostable resin, I think the most recent announcement of new capacity was 60,000 tonnes. So if you contrast that to the millions of tonnes produced by the Saudis of PE, 60,000 tonnes is a drop in the bucket. Because again, these products are designed to solve problems like the most inappropriately disposed of package. You know, could it be compostable? Maybe. Let's have a look. But it's certainly not going to solve all the issues of problematic plastics by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm hoping that sort of makes things a little bit clear. Where are the main applications in 2019 for these? Here you can see in this chart between rigid packaging, textiles, flexibles, automotive, etc. All the different markets that these products can go into. And one of the most interesting things I'll point out, I'm not sure who's on the line, but most people probably are familiar to some degree with the PLA, which is a renewable material. I think the studies show at the moment that the biggest demand for this product is in paraphernalia related to vaping, which is a long way from organics recycling or packaging. So these materials are finding homes in a number of different markets, not just into organics recycling. The biodegradable or compostable plastics market segment, here you can see a bit more focus into flexible packaging, rigid packaging, but there's around 14% of the global capacity is destined for agricultural and horticultural applications like mulch films or possibly silage wraps or things of that nature. Some consumer goods, textiles, building construction, automotive and transport. So again, it's not all focused on packaging. Yes, it's significant, but it's not all destined for packaging, be it flexible or rigid. And what we're seeing now is that with the global shortage of these materials and demand outstripping supply, people are looking at what are the applications that make the most sense, what are the most valuable, what are the most sustainable, where's the best place, what's the most appropriate use for these materials. And that's starting to steer the market. So for example, to replace a plastic straw with a compostable straw, which potentially is no more recoverable than the single-use plastic straw it replaces, ongoing, it might be that a compostable straw becomes an inappropriate use of these scarce materials. Now, I say might, consumers and industry and other people will decide, but these are distinct possibilities. So, with that, with the contribution of the circular economy, starting with diversion of organic waste from the home or commercial premises in compostable bags, which creates a robust organics recycling stream for compostable packaging in whatever form it might take, can go into, plus agricultural mulch films to replace non-recoverable, non-recyclable conventional plastics. I would just like you to think that these bioplastics are much more than just a plastic bag. If you have any questions, please visit our website, please visit European Bioplastics or contact the ABA directly at these email addresses. And with that, more or less to time, Alex, I'm happy to take any questions.
Terrific. Thanks so much, Rowan. We do have a couple of questions. So let's start with Emma has a question. She says, I really like that you are committed to introducing compostable plastics for applications where organics are utilised, such as mulch. In terms of being able to communicate effectively to the layperson, as she's an education officer, do you think that there will become an accepted standard by 2025 that all such packaging products for mulch bags will be made of bioplastic? And if so, how will FOGO processors be able to easily confirm that these are not in fact contamination if they are pre-sorting?
Okay, she's talking about mulch bags. I think one of the big challenges we have with organic matter in a compostable bag is asking Mother Nature not to do what she wants to do, which is to biodegrade, if you like, that film. So we find potentially that to make the film thick enough to probably withstand premature biodegradation, it might make that bag uneconomic. But let's say you can solve that and you can put, hypothetically, mulch, soil amendments, compost in a compostable bag, that by having the logo and or indeed the AS, whatever it is, printed prominently on that bag, would to some degree give a processor the comfort that that bag is good to go. But it's rather hypothetical because it hasn't been done to my knowledge, because no one's really sort of solved the economic issue of making a bag that's price competitive compared to the very cheap alternative bags. Look, I'm happy to answer that question. If she wants to write an email, I'll try and find more information, but that's probably the answer at this stage.
Terrific.
Oh, and sorry, I think you said, do I think there's going to be a standard requiring that? I don't think there'd be regulatory enforcement to require it, but I certainly think that if the bags used today are non-recyclable, non-reusable because of the organic content they've had, then there should be an argument to look at making them compostable. But whether or not that's a good idea and cost effective and all the rest, I'd need to think about it.
No worries. So going over to Paul from University of Queensland. Now, you've already kind of touched on this, so I'll give you both elements of the question. So the first question was, can you describe the growth in demand that you expect to see in the market for bioplastic materials? With the follow-up of, in which product areas or applications do you think there are the best opportunities to grow a market?
Okay. There's probably diverging views on this. So today we see, well, I'd say the market today for the last 3, 4, 5 years here in Australia has been predominantly bags or flexible films for organic waste or maybe other things. And it's moved into now food service ware and things that are promoted, for example, through the compostable packaging guidelines in the APCO document. So food service ware, compostable coffee cups, things of that nature is where it is today. Where it will evolve to from there is, I think, as we tackle the issue of, say, plastics that either can't be recovered or recycled, so like conventional PE mulch films or silage wraps, it certainly could evolve that they might become, and we don't call them compostable because mulch films are not intended to be picked up and composted physically. Soil biodegradable, here we use the term soil biodegradable because they're meant to be left on the field to biodegrade in situ, leaving nothing behind. We will see probably an evolution in that to replace like the oxo-degradable materials, which whilst today are cheap and cheerful, certainly fragment into millions of pieces contributing to microplastics in agricultural soils. So if we can follow like what's happening in South Australia to, through the Parliament to ban oxo-degradable materials, I think that will give a genuine uplift to genuine soil biodegradable mulch films and maybe silage wraps or other things for agriculture. So I think that's a big area. And then more into the packaging area, where will that go? Well, there's so much inquiry and development going on everything from trays to different barrier films to many different applications in that space to the broad world of packaging. But do they meet the requirements of the APCO prep tool? Can they be collected curbside? Today, not in some cases because the prep tool doesn't recognise compostable packaging today because some of the people that, like Planet Ark, that run the prep tool don't see compostable packaging as suitable for curbside. And there's good reasons for that because how would you today tell one compostable package in a recycling bin or a FOGO from the 99 others that aren't? So until we sort of turn that tide around to it's all certified compostable or it's not, then I'm not sure exactly where that will land. But there's lots of examples out there on what these compostable packages might look like. So from coffee capsules to, as I've described, it's evolving very fast.
Okay, so let's have a look. The next question, actually we'll jump to Emily, who's got a question about compostable dog bags. So do you consider compostable dog waste bags to be an appropriate use of technology, given there is so much confusion amongst dog owners about where to dispose of them?
Look, I guess there's personal views and then there's association views, but we've had lots of discussion about this. We would question it, given that AORA has position on things like nappies and dog waste and stuff like that. I'm not convinced that a compostable bag, if what's in it is not going to be composted, what's the point? So we know there's people out there, but I see physically in the dog parks and stuff a lot of oxo-degradable and oxo-biodegradable bags claiming to be biodegradable, which they are not. And they end up going to landfill, as I understand it. I'm not sure that that's something that the organics recyclers actually want to receive. And were it to be, for example, that you had a certified compostable nappy, for example, which today we don't, I'm not sure that AORA members want to receive that, even if it is certified compostable. So it's not something I think we openly promote unless the processor specifically wants to receive that stream.
Okay, let's have a look. So we've got another question. We know PFAS is commonly used as a waterproofing agent in many compostable packaging items. And this person understands that the standards don't require testing for PFAS, but that there is a persistent through the 12 to 14 week composting cycle. What is the ABA's position on PFAS, and what is their advice to manufacturers and suppliers whose products do include PFAS?
I might need to ask Warwick on this, but I guess our first statement would be that PFAS is a ubiquitous material. If you've ever had Scotchgard in your home, you've got PFAS in your home. So I know it's a hot topic for processes and stuff like that, but I'm not sure I know when he says that PFAS is in what, I didn't hear what he said, in waterborne what, sorry?
So we've got, it's commonly used as a waterproofing agent in many compostable packaging items.
Okay, I don't know that. So can I ask Warwick as head of the technical committee if he has any knowledge on that? Warwick, are you there?
Warwick, I'm just going to let you speak. Hold on 2 seconds. Hold on.
Okay,
Warwick?
am I on?
Yep, you are on. We've got you.
Go ahead.
Neither of the Australian standards measure PFAS specifically. They weren't a consideration in all those years ago when the standards were written, nor do any of the similar standards in other jurisdictions. However, there is a limit for fluorine in the standards, and so it's addressed at that level in a whole host of metals which are not have a maximum limits. But specifically, PFAS is not measured at this stage. It doesn't affect the disintegration or biodegradation of the material. It's more what's left at the end of the process, and that hasn't, up until recent times, been considered to be something that anyone's concerned about. It's only in the last few years that it's achieved a priority. So at this stage, the standards don't address it. As I said, none that I'm aware of do. So it's a bit of a grey area for us, I'm afraid.
Well, Warwick, we'll take the question. We'll have some discussions, and we'll come back with some action plans on what we are going to do about it in the future.
Sure.
Terrific. Okay. Next question is from Mark. Is there any work being done to have certified testing for both commercial, industrial and home compostable products done in Australia at manageable costs?
Well, okay, define manageable cost. And well, the first answer is no, there is not. There's no accredited laboratory in Australia to do the work to the requirements of either standard. There are people that can perform the work, but they're not accredited. And Scion, I think, in the last 12 months has popped up as the most regional accredited laboratory, excuse me, able to do the work. I'm not sure what manageable cost means. I'm happy to have that discussion, but the average cost for an applicant to go through the ABA's process is between $700 and $1,700. So then there's if you want to license the use of the logos, that's $500 annual. So you might argue, is $2,000 unmanageable or is it manageable? I guess it depends on relativity. If you've not done test work on a material and you do need to go through all of the requirements of the standards, so you've got no test reports and you start from scratch, then there probably is a significant cost burden to have that work done in its entirety. However, most materials that are out there today have to some degree already been tested to the Australian standards, and therefore at the discretion of our auditor, they might say, oh look, this stuff contains product A plus product B. We know these products, that work's been done. We don't require all of the testing work to be done from beginning to end again. And they might do not a lesser audit, but there might be less cost impost in the process. That again is distinctly at the discretion of the auditor, but If you have to start from scratch, yeah, well, like any process for any product, then there's, you know, there's a cost to doing the business. But as I said, I think the average cost of verification through the ABA is up to $1,700 or something like that. But I'm happy to discuss that with individuals offline, but I don't see it as being cost prohibitive. But again, that's very relative.
Terrific. Okay, question from Kay. Is it likely that the ABA would approve an application for certification of a single-use FMCG product, something highly printed, for example, that cannot be reused or recycled?
Okay, well, first of all, the ABA doesn't approve or disapprove of anything. The ABA passes things to our auditor who go through the process. And if the product meets the requirements of the standards, then on their advice, we would issue a certificate of conformance. If it fails the requirements of the standards, we would not issue a certificate of conformance. So it's not a question of whether it's heavily or lightly or whatever like that. It's a question, does the product meet the requirements of the standards, pass or fail? That's the determinant.
Okay. Next one, in terms of FOGO streams, do you see a time where there will be a standard in compostable bags, allowing them to be easily identified from non-compostable bags in a short amount of time during a pre-sort process?
I'd like to think that there'd be a world where we got rid of all non-compostable plastic bags. I'd love to think that could happen. And then it would be very easy for people to know that the bags coming into their streams are more than likely certified compostable, whereas today most bags coming into people's streams more than likely are not. But you know, with the advent of single-use plastic bag bans, which quite frankly did not ban completely single-use plastic bags, it banned single-use plastic bags less than 35 micron. So the single-use plastic bag suppliers just cranked up a thickness and stayed in business. So if we could get rid of all single-use plastic bags that are non-compostable and make plastic bags that people want to have certified compostable, then that would make it much easier for the processor. Is that likely? Look, we advocate for it. Is there going to be a standard for it? I honestly don't know, but we advocate for a world where, you know, if you need a bag at all, it should be certified compostable, because it's not just taking stuff home from the shops. It's then being able to use that as a, you know, kitchen caddy liner, bin liner or something for your organic waste. But therein comes the education that's required on what is organic, what can go in that bag, what bin to put it in, can your council let you do it, will your municipality or people send it to be processed, will it go to the landfill? There's all these questions that need to be thought through. Realistically, what have we got, 570 councils or something in Australia, and today only 10% are looking at FOGO or something of that order. Can we move that needle to 50%? Maybe, but to 100%, probably not.
Okay.
And I'd quickly add, given the limitations of resin supplies I've tried to highlight in the presentation, will all of that global capacity go into the lowest end applications such as a garbage bag? Probably not. Will a lot of that production capacity be allocated to higher value applications like mulch film, you know, problematic plastic packaging? Yes, probably. And the highly commoditized low-end application of a compostable bag will probably struggle to be supplied out of these materials, but there could be other alternatives coming up.
Okay, so this is a good kind of segue into this. You made a point previously that compostable products are only useful if there's a pathway to compost them, i.e. it's useless or pointless if they end up in landfill. Surely it is still better for a compostable straw, for example, to end up in landfill as opposed to a plastic straw ending up in landfill?
I'd have to think my way through that, but a non-compostable straw is going to persist in the landfill for, I don't know, 100 years, 500 years, whatever the different numbers are. Compostable straw, it's an anaerobic environment, so it will probably slowly disappear over time. I think it's a question of resource efficiency, probably more than anything, just thinking off the top of my head, but you've got a polypropylene straw that's worth $0.01 and you've got a compostable straw that's 5 cents or whatever the maths work out to be, is it really better? I think I'm not sure that replacing a single-use plastic with a compostable plastic that's no more recoverable than the thing it replaces, I'm not sure that makes any sense.
Okay. From Stephen, given the huge difference between the production of conventional and compostable plastics, are there limitations or opportunities relating to the amount or type of crops available for producing compostable plastics?
That's a really good question. I've got an entire study on the use of, inverted commas, food source materials for production of bioplastics. So perhaps rather than trying to answer that, I can provide that study which answers those questions in really good detail. But it would take probably 10, 15 minutes to articulate a sensible answer. Can I provide the study to the interested person, please, Alex?
Yeah, terrific. Stephen, if you send us an email, we'll hook you up with Rowan to pass on that study. Okay, from Uma, how is the development of an international standard going for soil biodegradable mulch film?
Yeah, no, it's going really well. It's probably the most comprehensive ISO standard I've seen. And I believe it will be out in 2021 in September. So at 2021, early 2021. So it's not far away now. But yes, there is an ISO version of soil biodegradable mulch film, which is very comprehensive and details things like various UV requirements in different parts of the world, what gauge film to use, whether it should be black, white, transparent, double-sided, this or that or the other. So it's bubbling along really nicely and should be available. The ABA's position on that is we've not tried to develop an Australian standard for soil biodegradable mulch film. Our position has always been, if there's an ISO or an international standards organisation standard for that type of application, and it's not in conflict with what we think is appropriate for Australian conditions, then we'll default to the ISO standard in the absence of an Australian one. And that's still our position for biodegradable or soil biodegradable mulch film today, that when that is promulgated, published and out there officially, we will, because we've been involved in the development of it, we'll put that in as the default standard for Australia and indeed New Zealand. Will we run a verification program to the requirements of that standard? Probably yes. In the same way we probably will for marine biodegradable plastics if and when that standard finally emerges.
Great. The last question we've got so far, from a carbon footprint point of view in terms of manufacturing, what is the impact of compostable versus non-compostable?
What is the impact of compostable versus non-compostable? Good question.
From a carbon footprint point of view in terms of manufacturing.
Yeah, I got that. I'm going to have to do some research. I don't know the answer off the top of my head because different manufacturers claim different things. And it could be different between, say, the renewable people like the NatureWorks and people who make PLA from corn versus, for example, Braschem in South America who make biopolyethylene from sugar, which is a zero carbon footprint for that bio-based PE. But PLA, I'm not sure what they claim or have stated. Equally, I'm not sure what the other compostable resin producers claim necessarily on carbon footprint. So again, can I take that on notice and I will get answers? I'm not avoiding these questions. I want to get the right answer and then I'll make it publicly available to everyone who attended.
Yep, definitely. So I'm just bringing up our details so that people can contact us. Oh, hold on, we just had one more. Oh, Richard Fine has said some bioplastics, i.e. NatureWorks PLA, have a lower carbon footprint than conventional fossil-based plastics. So thanks for that, Richard. So it looks like we are out of questions and are pretty much perfectly on time. So unless anyone's going to shoot through a last question, what we will do is we will make this presentation available along with the recording online, probably within the next 24 hours. You'll get an email when it's ready. And in the meantime, by all means, please send through your any other questions, follow-ups to either the admin email address to myself or directly to Rowan, and we will get back to you.
No problems. Thanks again for hosting, Alex. Thanks, Peter and Peter. Thanks, everyone. And if there are anything you think of, as Alex says, please reach out. Happy to, as I said, we're about education. This is not a commercial enterprise. It's about answering the questions. So if you've got other questions out there, good, bad, or indifferent, shoot them through and we'll get you some answers.
Terrific. Peter O.
Thank you all. Thanks for your attention and your questions. And as Alex said, you've got the email address there. If you've got any follow-ups, anything occurs to you later on, even after you read the presentation that will be to you in 24 hours, please get in touch and we'll do our best to answer any questions you may have. Thanks again all and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.